When it all began 30 years ago, impossible. Could not believe it, that we would discover an organ that represented the sixth sense, and that we could change the behavior of people. I was a professor of anatomy at the University of Utah, and 30 years ago, I was doing some studies on certain components of the human skin, which I extracted from the human skin, and I put them in some flasks. Usually in the laboratory, people are very serious. They really concentrate on their work. They don't talk to each other too much. One day I noticed that the behavior of the people working in the laboratory changed.
Whose turn is it anyhow?
No, it's not my turn.
Their mood changed.
You can play
They were
bridge.
more friendly, more chatty. They wanted to relate to each other more, and which was very unusual.
What a cool game.
On other days, I noticed that the people went back to their old serious way of behavior.
Then, David Berliner began to notice a relationship between the flasks being closed or open and people's moods.
I love pizza.
Anything?
Could these flasks contain chemical messages that were affecting people's moods?
Nice, County.
He wondered if he'd possibly stumbled onto human pheromones. But his work at the time prevented him from following up on the hunch.
I like anything on pizza. No, but I've had
So I put the flasks in the deep freeze for the next 30 years.
Someday, he hoped to investigate if these skin extracts might contain human pheromones. Throughout the animal world, scientists know that pheromones have great influence on regulating behavior. Pheromones are chemical messages sent by one member of a species to other members of only that same species. Pheromones influence many different types of behavior, often setting the cues for sexual and mating activity. Lion to lion. Pig to pig. This boar has a powerful sexual pig pheromone called androstenol that's present in his breath. For these sows in heat, it's a real sexual turn-on. In animals, pheromone messages are detected by a special organ in the nose known as the vomeronasal organ, or VNO. But in human beings, no one had ever proved the existence of pheromones.
So you come in here a lot?
Could human beings also be powerfully affected by invisible chemical messages? Through some sort of sixth sense? And what would be the detecting mechanism, the human equivalent to a pig's VNO?
What, the place?
In 1703, a Dutch army surgeon, Frederick Reich, discovered and described the VNO in a wounded soldier. He reported it and drew it in the medical literature, but thought it had no function. Almost 300 years would pass before anyone paid it serious attention. By 1989, David Berliner was still puzzling over the odorless human skin extracts he'd isolated 30 years earlier, wondering if they might contain human pheromones. He turned to a colleague for advice.
I asked Dr. Larry Stances, a University of Utah neuroanatomist, for help.
I told David that we would first have to find something to receive the pheromones, something equivalent to the animal VNO. My colleagues began to peer up the noses of hundreds of human subjects. And to our amazement, they found VNOs in all of them.
The VNO is located in the lower part of the nose. It's completely separate from the olfactory nerves higher up in the nose, which are responsible for our usual sense of smell.
Next, we set up to see if the VNO was a functional organ. So we took out the 30-year-old skin extracts from the freezer.
For help, David Berliner turned to physiologist Luis Montiblanc, who was about to leave the country to return to his home in Uruguay. Berliner begged him to stay to find any sign that the VNO might be a responsive, working organ.
I didn't think we'd find a thing, but David persisted, and finally I agreed to stay and search for 6 months.
Monty Block designed a device that could deliver minute amounts of different substances as small as a few molecules directly to just the VNO. If the VNO responded, this device could measure electrical impulses at the point of contact. Different substances were tested in experiments to see if the VNO would produce a response.
When we exposed the vomeronasal organ to a placebo, there wasn't any response. When we exposed the vomeronasal organ to a scent, there wasn't any response. When we exposed the vomeronasal organ to the pheromone compounds, the meters went off scale like the 4th of July. It was amazing. We were astounded. We couldn't believe it.
I got very excited to find out that there was a reaction at the local level in the VNO, but we still didn't know if it really had a reaction in the brain or in behavior.
Berliner guessed that if the suspected feel-good pheromones affected the brain, they'd create changes in the central nervous system, skin response, temperature, respiration, heart rate. They put it to the test. When a placebo was used, there were no central nervous system changes. When a scent was used, again, no change. But when the VNO was exposed to the feel-good pheromones, immediate brain effects took place, changes throughout the central nervous system.
Aaron, how did you feel during the last test?
Well, it was really relaxing, different. I suddenly felt really good.
The compounds even seemed to affect emotions.
I got very excited, but I wasn't prepared for what Luis had to tell me next.
As we explored these brain responses to different pheromonal compounds delivered to the VNO, we found that they were sex-linked. For example, with some compounds, only men would react, and with other compounds, only women would react.
I forced him to go back to the lab and do the test again.
The results were definitely sex-linked.
We had species specificity, we had sexual differences, effect on the brain, effect on behavior, and therefore we had human pheromones.
So for the first time, one scientific team claimed evidence of human pheromones. But in social situations, do human pheromones really shape our different reactions?
Thanks.
There's something about her.
There's something about him. What a creep.
We humans have this whole system of chemical communication that nobody knew about before, which means that we're talking to each other chemically in all sorts of different ways at an unconscious level.
What are you doing later?
The research suggests pheromones, chemical messages, are emitted from human skin. In the nose, they trigger chemical receptors in the VNO. Signals are sent to the hypothalamus, which produces reactions in the body and in behavior. But how much influence do they have?
Pheromones are just one of many influences that act on the hypothalamus, which in turn is just one of many brain areas that are involved in determining behavior. For example, pheromones might set the mood for falling in love, but many other parts of the brain would be involved in determining whether this was the person you wanted to get married to.
To enhance the mood for sexual attraction, the perfume industry offers thousands of potions. Some make use of certain animal pheromones which carry strong scents that people find attractive, like musk, the most famous, which is from deer. People enjoy them for their wonderful smell. But is there any real hidden pheromonal response?
Some of the fragrances on the market have androstenol, which is one of the pig pheromones, and sometimes people have made claims that this is an aphrodisiac. Well, it is an aphrodisiac. It's an aphrodisiac in pigs. If you like pigs, by all means go to the pig farm, but otherwise stay clear. It has no effect as an aphrodisiac in humans. In fact, no pheromonal effect in humans at all. It doesn't affect the vomeronasal organ.
While a few companies have added animal pheromones, a company called Aerox has created something completely different, a new fragrance called Realm. They took the human feel-good pheromone Berliner's lab discovered and synthesized and added it as an active ingredient in this product. A version for men uses the male feel-good pheromone, and the version for women uses the female feel-good pheromone. Designed to enhance the wearer's sense of well-being with no aphrodisiac claims, it's been advertised by TV infomercial.
Remember when I told you that the word pheromone comes from the Greek and means literally, I carry excitement? Well, the first time you put on Realm, you'll know why. Because wearing Realm will make you feel better about yourself.
While the product is selling briskly, it's unclear if most users experience the feel-good effect the fragrance
Do you
claims.
ever have a bad time?
Meanwhile, in Salt Lake City, there's a new medical development on the horizon. And for David Berliner, the smell of something revolutionary is in the air. Scientists at Berliner's company, Ferrin, are inventing new substances derived from human pheromones, which they call vomeroferins. Berliner has ambitious plans to develop vomeroferins as a new kind of pharmaceutical.
We are going to apply to the VNO these particular pharmaceuticals that would act directly to the brain in an immediate way, which will not contaminate the body at all.
If Berliner's right, someday vomeroferins may instantly stem panic attacks and affect other functions of the hypothalamus and the hormonal system, to suppress appetite, to affect fertility, or stimulate sexual interest.
The benefit is that we are applying locally to the VNO these substances that send a message to the brain, and then the brain sends a message to the body to cure these diseases. Therefore, there is no contamination in the body, and therefore there's going to be less side effects.
Biologists have often wondered why humans don't seem to rely on messages received through their noses in the important way that other animals do. With the discovery of human pheromones and the functioning human VNO, the mystery may be solved. Through this sixth sense, we may be a lot more dependent on the nose and chemical signals than we've ever believed.
30 years ago, whoever would have thought?
Tomorrow